Welcome to the Drama Free Living Podcast. It's Dennis and Lisa McIntee, and today we're talking about 4 capabilities to creating a drama-free marriage. Going to be exciting. Now, Lisa, let's talk about where we started to think through this, and it's been a fascinating journey the last couple of months for us because a lot of people have talked to us about how do I work with my spouse, or I'm married to maybe a very ambitious person, and how do we work together, have a great marriage, and those things. So they really started asking you that question.
They have. I've had so many people approach me on, do I have materials? Do I have information for high-performing individuals, for high-performing couples?
Right.
And some of them work together in their business. Some of them each work in their own business, or maybe some of them are working at home, but also it's couples that are both high performing, or it's maybe one high performing individual, and then the spouse is more of a support type of a person, more of a detail, more of a backstage type of person. So they're not necessarily the goer and the blower, but they're the ones that make possible everything for the goer and the blower to do. And how do we work together without steamrolling each other or holding each other back?
And it's kind of how to take the drama out of that teamwork between husband and wife, just however it looks. And so we've been thinking through this. And Lisa, one thing that we try to do at least once a year is just get away, you and I, and really just work on our marriage, work on what some of our personal goals are, what are our family goals, and kind of get out there.
And we even do kind of talk about our professional goals since we work together and we lead our business together.
Right. But it's a time where we just go away, and we like to wrap it, if we can, around a marriage conference. And one we decided to go to this year was in Cancun. In fact, at the time of this recording, we're leaving tomorrow for it. And so we signed up for it. It's hosted by One Extraordinary Marriage, and they have the best podcast on marriage. So we'll put their podcast there in the show notes.
The One Extraordinary Marriage podcast.
Yep. And so we signed up for it, and our friends Tony and Elisa De Lorenzo called us a couple weeks later, and they said, hey, you're coming to the marriage conference. Would you guys do a session on drama-free marriage?
And we said, sure, of course,
let's
why not?
do it.
We're passionate about being drama-free, and we're passionate about marriage, so
it kind of works together.
And that began our process of figuring out, okay, what would be 4 capabilities of a drama-free marriage? There are multiple ones, and these are 4 that we
worked for us.
We kind of picked as top. I mean, there are probably 8 to 10 easy that we could say are all very important.
Yeah, and so we don't want to say keys. We want to say capabilities, because look at like, hey, these are skills that I can develop. And so the first one that we kind of thought through, that we're working through and has really helped us, is ask for what you want.
Ask for what you want, and be specific. Specific, what do you want or what do you need? So for instance, there are times that as I have been stepping into a deeper role in our company, I have had to peel off some things and adjust, and it's a growth period for me. And I sometimes get to the point of overwhelm, and we have had to make adjustments, and you have had to step in and say, what do you need?
Right.
And I had to specifically say, okay, this is what I want, or this is what I need, but very specific.
Right.
For instance, we had a communication breakdown because I was
Come on, we never have communication breakdowns ever.
I was very depleted, and my love language is physical touch.
Yep.
And so I said, I need you to
just sit next to me.
Or touch me or whatever. Right. So you did, but it was not what I needed because I didn't ask specific enough. So you sat next to me, kind of a little stiff as a board because you weren't sure how to deal with the tension and your overwhelmed wife. It's a work in progress. We're getting better. And what I meant when I said, sit next to me or touch me is I meant more cuddle me.
Yeah.
And wrap your arm around me and love me in that way. Now, we didn't have to talk. You didn't have to do anything, but I needed to feel that warm physical touch. And the same with you, and you when you're asking, okay,
Well, Lisa, there's many times that, I'll say, I just need you to tell me how great I am. In fact, I don't even need to know what I'm great at. In fact, I don't even care what I'm great at. I just need to hear it from you.
And for me, I would have to know the specifics. But for you, I can just say, "Oh man, you're incredible. You do everything so well."
I'm all in.
And
Let's go.
and I could be very generic, and you would think that you were flying on the top of a mountain.
Yeah, and I think the challenge becomes is that when you're emotionally connected to issues, and there's nothing more emotional than a marriage. And so when you're emotionally or kids, right? So when you're emotionally connected to issues, your clarity really becomes cloudy. And when it's so cloudy, many times that question, okay, what do I want? It takes a minute.
It does take
a minute.
And
the better you get at it. And so what we want you to see is that it's really a skill. Being able to tell people what you want is or what you need is a skill.
And we developed a tool. It's the Trigger Identifier. We call it the Trigger Identifier. But essentially, it is sitting down and saying, okay, this happened. This situation happened.
Circumstance,
the
event.
Circumstance. And it's a way to walk through the circumstance in what I was feeling. What did I actually need?
Yep.
What was it that I was expecting maybe from you that you didn't give me, and realizing that that was possibly a lie, a foundation of what was going on in my thought process.
Well, and what I love about that tool is it really helps you own your own stuff, right? And we'll kind of, maybe we'll go to that one kind of next, like own your own stuff.
Yeah, but that is a really good way. Walking through this Trigger Identifier is a way to realize, okay, what is it that I need, or what is it that I want, and be able to be specific.
And it almost like it asks you 5 questions that takes you from the emotion to that place of logic. And then once you get to that place, then you can have a conversation, because it's really hard to have a conversation about feelings, right? I feel frustrated. And then I feel like I have to fix that frustration. And it's not even the real issue. This is just sort of the symptom, the feeling, but I don't know what you're thinking. And what I love about that tool, and so listen, Trigger Identifier, it's going to be in the show notes. We want to give it to you, and you can use it with not just your marriage, but you can use it with your closest relationships.
You can use it with any situation that you have a whole series of emotions or even conflict going on internally. And you sit down and you write down that situation, and then you walk through the steps, and through that you actually figure out what it is that I need. It's a way to own my stuff, and it's a way for me to take responsibility for my life, for my actions, for my feelings and choices, rather than me expecting you to step in and fill it. And so it's a way for me not to be codependent. It's a way for us not to go into the drama triangle.
Right. So let's just kind of describe what we're talking about when we say drama triangle. Right? There's sort of 3 different sides. When events happen, circumstances happen, people could either like play the blamer, right? Go into that blame, criticize, Lisa, it's all your fault. You're responsible for, or you play the victim. Kind of that learned helplessness. Oh, there's nothing that I can do. I don't have any other choice. Or you can play the rescuer, where I'm going to come in, fix you, work harder on your life than you're willing to work on it, and, kind of come in and, just save the day type of thing. And those are sort of 3 different roles that people play.
You naturally tend to lean toward one particular role.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is once you step into that triangle,
you play all 3 roles.
You just go all the way around and you spiral.
Right. Because, for example, maybe like there's an issue and I step in to solve it for you. Right. So I step in to rescue you, solve it for you. Well, here's what's interesting. When I step in and rescue you, I typically don't want to do it. Right. So then I'm angry and I play the blamer. And then I go immediately to victim, go, oh, she'll never change. This is how it's always going to be. And I've just entered into that triangle of helplessness. And what we've discovered is that almost like that rescuing piece is kind of the doorway. Once you enter into that doorway, you're going to play the other 2 just automatically. Just your brain just goes there.
Or the helpless, the victim piece. When you step in, it's how you go. And so I was having a conversation with a gentleman, and he told me that most people have a perception on their perception on authority, how they relate to authority.
Yep.
And he said that's you either relate to authority typically one up or one down, meaning when you step into a situation, you may go into the authority mode. So you may go into the
trying to control it, be in control and be in charge.
Right, which could be the rescuing. It could be the blaming, or you could step into it as one down,
like the victim,
as the helpless individual involved. And it's fascinating when he told me that. I knew immediately that my natural tendency is to step into the helpless victim. Yeah. My natural tendency is to step into the one down on authority. Yeah. And then you and I were talking about it in the car on the way here. Yeah. And your natural tendency is to step into the one up and to the control.
Right.
So,
where I rescue or blame, one of those two.
Right. And so when the two of us get into a situation and we don't function well, we don't function in a healthy manner, and I tend to go to the helpless individual and you tend to go to the controller, the one up on authority, it's a wicked cocktail because we can jump into that drama triangle and we can hit all 3 points multiple times. And it's being able to identify,
and really being aware of like, hey, this is happening. It goes back a little bit. It's that crazy cycle, right? I go into that crazy cycle where you don't feel loved and I don't feel respected. And then we swirl around in that crazy cycle. And it's really recognizing it and being able to step out of it is really the key. It's because I think by human nature, you kind of go into it. It's really hard not to go into it, but when you go into it, to be able to step out of it as quick as possible.
Right. And then you can take responsibility for how you react even when you're upset.
Absolutely. And so ask for what you want, get real clear, and then own your own stuff. And I have this idea that I want this, but Lisa, it's not your responsibility to give it to me.
Right. I'm going to own my stuff. Yeah. And because of that, I can accept that my spouse can't meet my every need.
And I think that's the next point.
Then that's number 3.
Yeah. And it's this idea of needs negotiation. And I think there are really 3. Now, here's what's fascinating. There are 3 great rules in a marriage, but there are also 3 great rules for teams. And we teach this as you're creating culture because just like you and I have a culture in our marriage, teams have their own culture. And as team leaders and team members, there are really 3 questions to really ask, right? So as a team leader, what do I need from my team, right? So as a husband, what do I need from my spouse, right? And then the second question, what does my spouse need from me?
Right.
Or what does my team need from me? And then the third question is how do we handle conflict? And I think those questions, those 3 questions, getting very, very clear on them really helps you because we're not saying don't have conflict.
Right.
Because conflict is good. And really conflict just means you care.
Well, conflict truly is a conversation. It is a conversation where 2 people have different opinions. Right. And you know that you are in a healthy relationship when you can have both individuals in your relationship or even on your team. You know you're in a healthy team when the individuals on the team are allowed to have differing opinions. They can have a difference in opinion. They can have a difference of idea of how they do things because we're all unique and we come to that team or to the marriage, to the family with our own set of strengths and weaknesses and skills. And so I can shine in areas that you cannot, and you shine in areas that I cannot. And so when we recognize this is your area of shining, this is my area of shining. So when we come to a point of some conflict, being able to understand, okay, this is one of your superpowers. I will defer to you because it's your superpower. But along those lines, knowing that your spouse or your team can't meet your every need because there are certain things you need to come into your team as a whole individual.
As a healthy person.
As a healthy person, that means I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. I know when I feel triggered and I'm going to react and possibly blow up or explode or fight or flight or freeze or fawn. So just being self-aware to know this is how I respond. And then you can begin to know when you are escalating, but also your spouse can know or your team members can know because I have to come in as a healthy individual, not expecting you as my spouse to fill up my holes.
Yeah, and it's this idea of honoring the differences, not being mad about the differences. How many times do we go, oh, they're not this, and I want them to be this, and they're not, they're unique. There's differences, and learning to celebrate the differences and value the differences and valuing that uniqueness. And we tell team members as you're working with a team, I mean, how many times do I have an apple, but I really need orange juice? And I'm trying to get orange juice from this apple, and I'm never going to get orange juice from an apple. I need to get the best apple juice I can get from this team member. And it's the same with the marriage, is that I have needs, you have needs, and we have this needs negotiation conversation, right? Not that anybody's needs are superior or better than anybody else's. And Lisa, what I love about the trigger indicator that we've created is it helps you get clear on what your need is. And it helps you own your need. And it helps you not play the blamer and go, well, they have to meet my need. No, it's my need. I need to get it met. So it's this needs negotiation and really deciding almost like we teach in teams, like rules for conflict.
Well, so before you go to rules for conflict,
Yeah.
kind of talk more about a needs negotiation conversation. What does that look like? What do you mean? Because I understand. I mean, we've done this.
We've done this plenty of times.
But if I would approach someone and say, it sounds like a really good time for a needs negotiation conversation.
That maybe
it
is
would
not
be
the
a
best
deer in the
language.
headlights.
Right, that might not be the best language.
I love the language because it's very succinctly what it is. But explain it a little bit.
Yeah, it is basically where we sit down and we say, hey, when communicating with me or when this project happens, this was my expectations and this is what I need from it. This is the outcome or the behavior. And you just get very, very clear. Now, that team member has a choice because they're ridiculously in charge of them, right? And then they also say, hey, well, when this happens, this is what I need. For example, like a great question to ask is like, hey, when communicating a problem to me, what do you need? Hey, I need you to be straightforward. And you say, hey, when communicating a problem to me, I need you to bring me all the facts. Okay, well, there it is. It's like, when I communicate to you, Lisa, I need to bring you the facts. When you communicate to me, you need to be more straightforward. And it's just having that out there, not that you have to meet it, but I at least know where you stand, and then I have a choice to step into it.
And for instance, when we're each under stress, we need something different. Because stress happens every day in relationships. And when I am in a place of stress, I can tell you, this is what I need, or you can ask me, hey, what do you need? So when we're communicating and I'm in a place of stress, what I need is I need you to approach me softly and slowly without pressuring me, because when I'm approached fast, quick, and hard, it escalates the stress and it escalates the overwhelm for me. But for you, if you're in a place of stress, what is it that you need?
I need you to be very straightforward and very open and encouraging.
And a little faster pace.
Very fast paced. Yeah, the faster the better. And it's just our different styles, our different needs. And this is where we're unique and really valuing it and understanding it. At least another tool, and we'll put this in the show notes for you, is when dealing with me. And it is a simple 7-step question that you can walk through to really understand what your needs are in different situations. And we'll put that in the show notes for you too. And that'll just be our gift to you so you can have it. And then this last idea is, how do we have hard conversation? How do we handle conflict? Right? I know the secret sauce to our marriage is we just don't use the word divorce.
Right.
Right. That is just a rule. I know there's times we've been so mad at me and I've been so mad at you, but it just never enters into the vocabulary. So the thought never, ever goes there. I remember, when we first got married, we had this issue and I said, hey, listen, if you decide to leave, just tell me where we're going because I'm coming with you. Right? It's like, hey, this is a life sentence. We just got to figure this out. And the great teams have great rules for conflict.
Right. And we set that down between us because we both came from broken homes.
Right.
And the problems that caused in our families and even in our lives growing up with broken homes,
Right.
we knew that's not what we wanted for our family. So that's how that was one of our rules of engagement. And so for each person, based on what your goals are, for each team based on what your goals are, you set up rules of engagement. So when difficult conversations, when conflict happens, this is the no-fly zone. This is where we do not go. You do not threaten. If you're at work and you get overwhelmed, you do not threaten to quit. That's a no-fly zone. It's one of our rules of engagement. There's different rules of engagement that we set up, but a lot of it has to do with the stories that we tell.
Yeah, and this really kind of gets to the last part is we really learn how to have difficult conversations. Because typically what happens is we see behavior, we hear words spoken, and we immediately tell ourselves a story. And then that story produces a feeling which drives itself out to an action. And the key is that story that we tell ourselves. And I think that's what happens when people get triggered, right? Is they tell themselves a story. And what's interesting is a story is just a story, right? It's your personal interpretation of what you saw and heard. And many times it's not even true. Well,
and your personal interpretation of what you saw and heard is going to be different than my personal interpretation of what I saw and heard. So, for instance, this morning we were getting ready.
Do we have an argument this morning?
No, we didn't.
Okay, good.
And we were getting ready, and your shirt, you had steamed it, and you asked me, "Hey, how does this look?"
Yep.
And I looked at it, and I thought, it looks pretty good, but it could use to be, steamed some more. And you said, okay. And I asked you, well, do you know how to use the steam cycle on the dryer? Because that's maybe about all it needed. You said no. And I said, okay, well, let me show you.
Right.
And then you said, well, no, I've got it. And it was interesting. We had a whole conversation about this on what I thought and the story I was telling myself and what you thought and the story you were telling yourself.
Yeah, because the story I told myself when I said, when you asked, you said, well, here, let me show you, is I thought you were rescuing me.
I'm going to take over and do it for you.
Right, and it's like, hey, I want to solve the issue of steaming the shirt all by, I can do this myself, right? That was, but you had a totally different interpretation.
And my interpretation of that situation was, I said, well, do you know how to use the steam cycle? Yeah. You said no, and left it there. And I thought, okay. I thought, it wasn't no, it's okay, I'll figure it out or whatever. It was no. So I said, okay, well, let me show you. And then because I thought, okay, he's left the door open. I have time. We can totally do this. And then you said, no, I got it. And it felt as a brush off to me in that it was a little bit. So your idea of I was trying to take over created a story in your mind that caused tension and came out in how you expressed no, I got it. And I could feel that because we can feel people before we can hear them.
Absolutely.
And so people can feel you. They can feel your demeanor before you ever even open your mouth. And it's because of your body language. It's Dennis, what is it? Your heart.
Your heart beats vibrations out 8 feet in front of you. People feel that vibration. They feel your emotions right before they ever, even hear the words you say. And really, Lisa, this whole idea of stories is really the meaning that you put to things.
Right.
Right. So this happens and you put a certain meaning to it. And it's part of what happens to cause you to trigger and walk through that cycle into the crazy cycle. And it's really why we created the trigger indicator, is so that you can put the correct meaning, and a little bit like nothing has meaning except the meaning you give it. I mean, that's a pretty powerful idea that it has no meaning, but whatever meaning you give to it, it is true to you.
Absolutely. And the trigger identifier, it's fascinating because as you go through and you do this, you can begin to see patterns of, oh, this is showing up again. This story that I was telling myself regarding the hot tub is the same story I was telling myself regarding steaming my shirt. And Absolutely. You begin to see these patterns, and it provides you with some self-awareness because once you begin to realize, oh, this wasn't a good story. This was not a true story, an accurate story of what was going on. And that's how you discover what your triggers are.
Well, and when you know the when you see the pattern, it tells you the root problem. And then once I see the root problem, I can begin to get a strategy to change it, because when you can see it, you can change it. The problem is you can't see it. Mm-hmm. And typically, whatever problem you have in your relationships is not really the real problem. The real problem is you have an emotional connection to the problem. And the trigger identifier kind of helps you step out of that. And so we have discovered that this is a pattern in a lot of things, where I feel rescued at times, or you feel rescued, and what do I need to do so that I don't go into that state? What do I not to change your behavior, right? You're in charge of you, I'm in charge of me, but what do I do to step out of that state so I don't fall into that? Because you didn't deserve for me to kind of snap at you this morning, right?
No, I did not.
And I'm so sorry. Okay.
But also at the same time, us communicating that makes me realize, okay, when you kind of snapped, it wasn't that it was something toward me, it was something internally within you. Yeah,
and it kind of helps you process whatever behavior. So
it changes the meaning that I place on something, and it changes my story.
Yeah. So listen, we want you to download the Trigger Indicator. We used it for the conference, but we want to give it to you as a free gift, so you can download it. We'll put it there in the show notes. Lisa, what's your big takeaway from 4 capabilities of a drama-free marriage?
I am going to let you steam your own shirts.
Oh gosh, and I'm going to not let you rescue me. No, seriously.
Seriously, it's I love the trigger identifier or indicator, and how you can take anything and walk it through, and it identifies your trigger. It identifies what you actually need. It can identify the story that you're telling yourself. It goes through, and so we've got ask what you want, accept your spouse can't meet every need, learn how to have difficult conversations, and own your own stuff. And essentially, this trigger identifier, it walks through all of these. It walks through all of these, and it's a thinking tool to help you walk through all of these so that we can keep our marriage drama-free.
Yeah, and so I think for me, I'm going to get better at having difficult conversations. So get ready, here it comes. But I do tend to avoid and do sort of, don't tackle it head on. It's different professionally than it is personally, and it's just sort of how it works. So this has been helpful for me. So we want you to download the Trigger Identifier, and we'll see you next time on the Drama Free Living Podcast.